What if we discover that one of the most influential figures in history, whose existence has been debated for centuries, actually walked this earth? Imagine for a moment that archaeological, historical, and documentary evidence converges to confirm what millions have believed for millennia. This is the fascinating case of Jesus of Nazareth, a figure who has generated both devotion and skepticism in equally monumental proportions. For decades, scholars and skeptics have questioned the historicity of Jesus, arguing that he might be a legend, developed over the centuries. However, recent revelations in public forums, such as the Joe Rogan Experience podcast with Mel Gibson, have brought to light compelling evidence that challenges this perspective. The existence of Jesus is supported not only by religious texts, but by a wide range of archaeological and documentary evidence that transcends the purely theological realm. The historical context of the first century presents a fascinating panorama where the Roman Empire dominated vast regions, including the province of Judea. In this complex environment emerged a preacher from Nazareth whose revolutionary message about love, forgiveness, and a spiritual kingdom would alter the course of history. His brief ministry, documented in multiple ancient sources, culminated in his crucifixion under the governance of Pontius Pilate, a fact corroborated by various historical sources. The contemporary discussion about the historicity of Jesus takes on new dimensions when we consider the number of ancient documents that mention the carpenter from Nazareth. During their conversation on the podcast, Mel Gibson highlighted an astonishing fact. More than 40 historical documents make direct reference to Jesus, a remarkably higher number than the 10 records that mention Emperor Tiberius, who ruled Rome between 14 and 37 A.D. This contrast is particularly significant when we consider that Tiberius was one of the most powerful leaders of his time, while Jesus lacked monumental representations or commemorative coins. Archaeological analysis has provided tangible evidence that complements these documentary records. In 1961, the discovery of the so-called Pilate Stone in Caesarea Maritima confirmed the existence of the Roman governor mentioned in the Gospels. This Latin inscription, dated to the era of Emperor Tiberius, establishes beyond doubt that Pontius Pilate held the office of prefect of Judea, thus validating a crucial element of the biblical accounts. The artifact, currently exhibited at the Israel Museum, serves as a silent witness to the events that led to Jesus' crucifixion. An even more revealing find emerged in 1990 with the discovery of a special ossuary near Jerusalem. This burial box contained an inscription identifying its occupant as Joseph, son of Caiaphas, coinciding with the description of the high priest who, according to the Gospels, judged Jesus. Scientific analyses confirmed that the remains belonged to a man approximately 60 years old, perfectly compatible with the historical chronology of Caiaphas. This discovery strengthens the credibility of the biblical accounts by validating the existence of a central figure in the trial against Jesus. Mel Gibson shared a particularly illustrative anecdote during the podcast. He recounted how his youngest daughter, faced with the question about the historicity of Jesus, found visual answers by examining photographs of Caiaphas's ossuary. The child, with the clarity characteristic of innocence, concluded that if the accuser had existed, the accused must have existed too. This simple but powerful reasoning highlights how sometimes the truth can be more accessible than we assume. hidden beneath layers of complex analysis and academic skepticism. Archaeological research continued to provide significant surprises in 2002 with the discovery of James's ossuary. This burial box bore an Aramaic inscription stating, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." Although its authenticity has been the subject of academic debate, recent chemical analyses suggest it dates from the 1st century. Statistical studies estimate that approximately 20 men in Judea could have shared this specific combination of names, making plausible its identification with the James mentioned in Paul's writings as the brother of Jesus. Other archaeological finds have contributed to reconstructing the world in which Jesus lived. The Sea of Galilee boat, discovered in 1986, represents a perfect example of the vessels used by fishermen like Peter and Andrew. Preserved in the Galilee Museum, this artifact transports our imagination directly into the gospel narratives. Similarly, the pools of Bethesda and Siloam, mentioned in the Gospel of John as sites of miracles, have been physically located, confirming the geographical accuracy of the biblical accounts. The Roman practice of crucifixion, central to the narrative of Christ's passion, also counts with direct archaeological evidence. In 1968, the remains of Yehohanan, a man crucified in the 1st century in Jerusalem, were discovered. An iron nail found in his heel provides chilling details about the brutality of the Roman procedure, paralleling the description of Jesus' crucifixion. Mel Gibson used these pieces of evidence in his movie The Passion of the Christ, accurately representing instruments like the flagrum and the position of the nails according to these archaeological findings. Paul of Tarsus's testimony adds another layer of historical verification. In his first letter to the Corinthians, written around 55 AD, Paul states that Jesus appeared to more than 500 people after his death, many of whom were still alive at that time. This type of statement would be easily refutable, if untrue, given that witnesses were available to confirm or deny the account. The radical transformation of the disciples, who went from being frightened followers to martyrs willing to die for their faith, constitutes another powerful indicator of the authenticity of their experiences. The Nazareth inscription, discovered in 1878 and dated to the reign of Claudius, 41 to 54 AD, offers additional evidence of the early impact of Christianity. This marble plaque decrees the death penalty for anyone removing bodies from sealed tombs, interpreted by many scholars as a Roman response to the Christian narrative of resurrection and the Jewish accusation that the disciples had stolen Jesus' body. Though it does not directly mention Jesus, it suggests that the resurrection narrative was already widely circulating less than a decade after the crucifixion. Textual sources headed by the New Testament provide the main framework for understanding Jesus' life. The 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written between 70 and 90 AD, though based on much older oral traditions that began to spread shortly after his death. Evangelist Luke explicitly outlines his investigative methodology, highlighting that he consulted eyewitnesses of the events narrated. Specific linguistic details, such as the preservation of original Aramaic words, reinforce the authenticity of the transcriptions. Paul of Tarsus's letters represent the oldest Christian documents available, written just 20 years after the crucifixion. Though he did not personally know Jesus, Paul had direct contact with key figures like Peter, John, and James. His writings document the early belief in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, and record appearances to numerous witnesses. Paul's radical conversion from persecuting Christians to becoming one of their main defenders underscores the depth of his conviction in the reality of what he experienced. The Gospel accounts offer specific details about Jesus' life that coincide with the known historical context of the first century. Criticism of the Pharisees' meticulous tithing, his prediction about the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, fulfilled in 70 A.D., and his activity in places like Capernaum find archaeological confirmation. Excavations at the temple have revealed structures like the southern steps, where Jesus likely taught, demonstrating the detailed knowledge of the Gospel authors about first-century Judea. Roman contemporary writers also left records of Jesus and his followers. Tacitus, in his Annals circa 120 A.D., mentions the crucifixion of Christ under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Suetonius records disturbances in Rome related to Chrestus during the reign of Claudius, probably a reference to Christ. Pliny the Younger, in his correspondence with Emperor Trajan, circa 111 A.D., describes organized Christian communities worshiping Jesus as a god. Flavius Josephus, in his Antiquities of the Jews, circa 94 A.D., mentions Jesus as a wise man executed by Pilate and specifically references James, the brother of Jesus called Christ. These convergent testimonies, coming from Christian and non-Christian sources, build a solid case for the historicity of Jesus. His impact extended rapidly from Judea to Rome, reaching even remote regions of the empire in less than a century. Early Christian communities, composed primarily of common people, found in Jesus' message a powerful response to social and spiritual inequalities of their time. The promise of life beyond death and teachings about loving one's neighbor resonated deeply in a world in need of hope. Mel Gibson concluded his reflection by emphasizing that while evidence may eliminate intellectual excuses, faith requires a personal decision. Historical and archaeological evidence does not generate faith by itself, but provides a solid foundation for those seeking to understand the reality of Jesus. As he expressed, he preferred to face ridicule for believing in Christ rather than receive applause for embracing comfortable denial. This stance reflects the central paradox of Christianity, a faith that finds its strength precisely in confrontation with doubt and skepticism. The story of Jesus remains relevant not only for its historical dimension, but for the continuing impact of his teachings on universal themes like forgiveness, human dignity, and hope. The presented evidence, far from exhausting the mystery of his person, invites deeper exploration of his meaning for our times. In a world that often seems disconnected from its spiritual roots, the convergent testimony of multiple sources about Jesus' life offers a unique opportunity to reconsider his legacy and message for humanity.